What if one of the old coins sitting quietly in a drawer, jar, pocket or collection could be worth thousands of dollars, and the most surprising part is that you might not even realize what you're holding? Today we're looking at 10 historic American coins, 5 Buffalo nickels and 5 Mercury Dimes, and we're going to alternate between them because each coin has its own story, its own secrets, and its own reasons collectors continue searching for examples today. But here's the catch: the date alone does not automatically make an old coin valuable. Condition, mint mark, rarity, errors, varieties, strike quality, and collector demand can completely change the value. Let's begin with our first Buffalo nickel. The Buffalo nickel is one of the most recognizable American coins ever produced. Featuring a Native American profile on the obverse and a powerful American bison on the reverse, this 5-cent coin looks more like a piece of American history than ordinary pocket change. Buffalo nickels were produced during an era when American coinage was becoming increasingly artistic, and their bold design makes them extremely popular with collectors. But there's a major reason collectors examine these nickels so carefully. Many Buffalo nickels circulated heavily, and the dates and details on worn examples can become extremely difficult to read. That means a coin that appears ordinary at first glance may deserve a much closer inspection. Look for the date, mint mark, overall condition, and especially unusual characteristics. If a Buffalo nickel has a scarce date, a desirable mint mark, a strong strike, or an important variety, its value can rise dramatically. For the first coin in our journey, let's imagine that we're looking at a collectible example with the right combination of age, condition, and rarity. A coin like that could potentially enter the $5,000 range in a strong collector market, depending heavily on authentication and grade. And that is only our first coin. Now let's switch from the rugged Buffalo nickel to one of the most beautiful silver coins ever made by the United States Mint, the Mercury Dime. The Mercury Dime, officially known as the Winged Liberty Head Dime, was struck during the early 20th century and has become a favorite among collectors because of its elegant design and silver content. On the front, Liberty wears a winged cap, while the reverse features a fasces surrounded by olive branches. The design is packed with symbolism. But what makes these dimes especially fascinating is what can happen when rarity and condition come together. Millions were produced, but not every date and mint combination is equally common, and some examples are significantly harder to find in high grades. Collectors carefully inspect the date, mint mark, strike, luster, surface quality, and the amount of original detail remaining on the coin. A heavily worn Mercury dime might be worth considerably less than a rare, beautifully preserved specimen. And this is where the hunt becomes exciting. You could have 2 coins from the same year that look similar to an inexperienced collector, while their certified grades and market values are dramatically different. For our second coin, let's place the potential value around $2,000 for a desirable collectible example. But remember, that is not a guaranteed price for every Mercury dime. It represents the kind of value a genuinely scarce and well-preserved example might reach. Now we return to our third coin, another Buffalo nickel. This is where the story gets even more interesting, because Buffalo nickels can hide their most important clues in tiny details. The mint mark can matter, the date can matter, the condition can matter. Even the strength of the design can matter. On worn Buffalo nickels, the date may be nearly invisible, but on a better preserved specimen, the details can tell a completely different story. Collectors also watch for recognized varieties and unusual striking characteristics. Some Buffalo nickels have become famous because of overdates, doubled features, or other varieties that can dramatically increase collector interest when properly authenticated. Imagine discovering an old nickel that has been sitting unnoticed for decades and then realizing that its tiny details match a recognized variety. Suddenly, that 5-cent coin becomes something collectors want to investigate. For our third coin, we'll use a possible value of around $1,000 as an attention-grabbing example for a desirable collectible specimen. The real value, however, depends on the exact date. mint mark, variety, condition, and current market. And now we move back to the Mercury dime. Think about how many of these coins passed through American hands during the first half of the 20th century. They were used in stores, carried in pockets, placed in cash registers, and eventually disappeared into collections, boxes, and old family belongings. Today, collectors are searching for examples with sharp details and strong eye appeal. One of the most important things to understand about old coins is that age by itself does not automatically create enormous value. A coin can be more than 100 years old and still be relatively affordable, while another coin from the same era can command a much higher price because of rarity, grade, or a significant variety. That's why serious collectors don't simply ask, "How old is this coin?" They ask, "What exactly is this coin, and what makes this particular example different?" For our fourth coin, let's imagine a Mercury dime with a desirable combination of rarity and condition reaching approximately $3,000. Again, the actual market value could be dramatically different depending on the specific coin. Now we reach the halfway point, and this is where you should start looking at your own collection differently. The fifth coin is another buffalo nickel, and if you have one at home, don't immediately clean it. This is extremely important because cleaning an old collectible coin can damage its original surface and potentially reduce its desirability to collectors. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and inspect it under good lighting. Check the date. Check for a mint mark beneath the denomination area on the reverse. Look at the Native American portrait and the buffalo. Are the details sharp or heavily worn? Does anything look unusual? Does the coin have a recognized variety? And most importantly, could it be a coin that deserves professional authentication? Buffalo nickels are fascinating precisely because their history is visible on the surface. They represent an America that was changing rapidly, and today they are treasured not only for potential monetary value but also for their historical significance. If we imagine our fifth coin as a scarce and well-preserved example with strong collector demand, a possible value around $5,000 makes this point in the story especially exciting. But the real lesson is that the coin's exact identity matters far more than a dramatic number on a screen. Now it's time for our fifth Mercury dime. These dimes have a special place in American numismatics because they combine beautiful design, historical importance, and silver composition. When you hold one, you are holding a coin that circulated during an era of enormous change in American life. But collectors know that some Mercury dimes are much more desirable than others. The key is to identify the exact date and mint mark, then compare the coin's condition and characteristics against reliable references. A coin with full details in areas that usually wear quickly can be particularly interesting to collectors. This is why professional grading can sometimes make such a difference. A raw coin might look simply old, but a certified coin with a high grade can tell collectors exactly how well it survived decades of circulation and storage. For our sixth coin, we'll use a possible value of $2,500 for a particularly desirable example. But once again, never assume every coin of that type is worth thousands. The exact coin must be evaluated. Now we're back to another buffalo nickel, and by this point you may have realized something important. The real treasure hunt isn't simply about finding an old coin, it's about finding the right old coin. Buffalo nickels are a perfect example. Their design makes them instantly recognizable, but their values can range from modest collector pieces to highly sought-after rarities. A rare date, scarce mint mark, major variety, exceptional condition, or unusual error can change the equation. That's why collectors often use magnification and proper lighting when examining coins. Tiny details that are invisible at first glance can become extremely important. Imagine finding a buffalo nickel that looks ordinary until you inspect the last digit of the date or notice an unusual feature in the design. That moment of discovery is exactly why coin collecting remains so addictive. For our seventh coin, let's imagine that the right combination of rarity and preservation puts its potential value around $1,500. Not every buffalo nickel will reach this amount, but a legitimately scarce example can certainly deserve serious attention. And now we move to our 7th coin overall and another Mercury dime. At this point, the biggest question is simple. What would you do if you found one in an old family collection? Would you spend it? Would you put it in a drawer? Or would you stop and investigate? That final choice could matter. Mercury dimes are old enough that many surviving examples have experienced decades of handling, storage, environmental exposure, and sometimes improper cleaning. Collectors often prefer coins with original surfaces and attractive natural appearance. A strong strike and clear details can also make an enormous difference. Then there are the dates and mint marks that collectors have learned to watch closely. Some combinations are far scarcer than others, and that scarcity can create strong demand. If our 7th coin were a particularly desirable example with excellent preservation, we could imagine a possible value around $4,000. But again, the number is only meaningful after the coin is properly identified and evaluated. Now we come to the 8th coin, another buffalo nickel, and this one reminds us why old coins should never be judged simply by appearance. A dark, worn, unattractive coin might actually be historically important, while a bright polished coin could have been damaged by cleaning. Never assume that shiny automatically means valuable. In numismatics, originality can be far more important than artificial brightness. Look closely at the surfaces, edges, date, mint mark, and design details. If you suspect a variety or error, compare it against trusted numismatic references, or have it examined by a qualified professional. And if the coin appears genuinely rare, authentication becomes especially important because valuable rarities are sometimes imitated or misidentified. For this 8th coin, let's imagine an authenticated, desirable buffalo nickel reaching a potential value around $2,000. That 5-cent denomination suddenly doesn't seem so small anymore. Now we move to our 8th Mercury dime, and there is one detail collectors absolutely love: condition. The difference between a heavily circulated coin and a beautifully preserved example can be enormous. On Mercury dimes, examine Liberty's hair and winged cap, the lettering, the reverse fasces, and the surrounding details. Are the lines crisp? Is the coin well struck? Does it have attractive original luster? Are there scratches, dents, discoloration, or signs of cleaning? These questions help determine whether the coin is simply an old dime or something much more desirable. And if you discover a scarce date combined with strong preservation, the value can rise quickly. For our 9th coin, we'll use a potential figure of $3,500 for a premium collectible example. But always remember, an estimate is not an appraisal, and actual selling prices depend on the specific coin and the market at the time of sale. Now we have reached our 10th and final coin, and we're ending with another buffalo nickel. After looking at 10 coins, there is one message I want you to remember: don't overlook the 5-cent coin simply because it says 5 cents on the face. The denomination tells you what the coin was worth when it was issued, not necessarily what a collectible example could be worth today. The same principle applies to Mercury dimes. A coin's collectible value can be influenced by rarity, condition, demand, varieties, errors, mint marks, and authentication. So if you have old coins at home, don't rush to clean them. Don't trust every unbelievable internet price, and don't assume that every old coin is a fortune. Instead, identify the date, inspect the mint mark, study the condition, compare the details with reliable references, and if something looks genuinely unusual, consider professional authentication or grading. And for our final buffalo nickel, let's imagine the dream scenario: a scarce date, desirable variety, excellent preservation, and strong collector demand. A coin matching that kind of profile could potentially reach $5,000 or more, depending on the exact variety, grade, authentication, and market.